Okay, it is 6 o'clock, so I will call to order, this Wednesday, March 19th, 2025 work session of the Whitefish Community Development Board to order. And the first item on our agenda is discussion on the draft environment section. So that is you, Alan. You, Richard?
If I may,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, in the future, and perhaps even today, after the call to order, I think it would be appropriate to have public comment generally. I mean, that's usually an order.
Not in work sessions.
And in order to clear the air, it just seems to me that, for example, if in item 4, you're not calling for any public comment, even though it is a discussion item, this might be an opportunity to provide comment. So my suggestion and recommendation would be that you have a general public comment after your call to order. That's,
All right, we'll take that into consideration.
thank you.
Okay.
Since I just got public comment.
So on that same note, I had the idea that we should have public comment at the end after number 4 to allow for whatever people feel like they didn't get to address, even if it's not one of these 3 action items, just because we're having specific growth policy meetings. And this one's supposed to be public comment and a little less formal. So at the end, to catch anything that wasn't caught during these items.
Okay, well, we do have to be careful, because we don't want to keep rehashing things that have already come through. We're gonna get a better picture of what, of the outline tonight, of timeline of things. And it's something, we can take into consideration, but we can't keep retreading old ground. We have to keep moving forward, and by just having a general public comment period where people can bring up anything, I don't think is particularly helpful, because we have an agenda for a reason, and that's so that we can be efficient and get the work done that we need to get done. And I think we need to be really careful about how we look at allowing public comment on just anything at a work session. We have a period during our regular meeting for items that are not on the agenda tomorrow night, where people can comment on anything. That, to me, is the more appropriate place for that, rather than a work session where we're trying to get work done.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we move item 4 up to item where, above item 2 on the agenda.
Well, we don't. That's fine. You want to make that motion?
Seconded.
Can I speak to your motion?
I believe it would be appropriate, based on what we're hearing, that people do have some comments that they would like to make on the economic development goals and objectives, as do I. And I would like to deal with that as old business that needs to be addressed.
Okay, this is, again, this is not a formal meeting.
I understand that.
This is a work session. We have an agenda for the work session, the work that we need to complete for this work session. We have an agenda item where we will have time to discuss leftover issues from the economic development goals and objectives. Moving that to the front of, I'm not gonna vote for that, for your motion. And I think it's actually out of order because there isn't a section in here to determine whether we want to move things around on the agenda either. I'll allow it today, but then I think it's gonna have to talk with Dana and the city attorney about the order of things.
I appreciate your courtesy. Thank you.
So I'm not gonna vote for that, because we have an agenda of work we need to accomplish tonight. And by continuing to delay it for things that we have already gone over again, I don't think is appropriate.
I guess in response, I would just say that we have been attempting to try and get this on the agenda for discussion since the middle of last year. And we have not been successful. There have been some concerns that have been raised about the the study that has been conducted. And, I think that, each time that that topic has come up, we have been hearing the same thing that we just heard from the chairman now, which is that we just really aren't going to talk about this now. And my question is, if not now, when?
It's on the agenda tonight, Scott.
I understand.
It's at the end. It's a number 4. So it is there is room for it.
I understand. I'm just respectfully requesting that we move it up to the first item as
I
old business.
hear you. You have a motion on the table. It's been seconded. Is there any further discussion?
No.
Those in favor of moving item 4 to the front of the agenda, raise your hand. Those opposed? So it passes. So I guess we're moving to that, session. Alan doesn't have anything prepared for this because this is just the time for us to discuss this. We do, go ahead, Alan.
I guess I'm confused because at the last meeting, the board barely passed that we were going to talk about economic development later. Wasn't to be discussed anymore. That's what the motion was. So
Well,
I'm not prepared for that.
you don't have to, this is just board discussion. You don't have to. If you have questions if we have questions that you can answer, that's great. If you can't answer them, feel free to just say, I can't answer that because that's not the agenda item. That's not the agenda, what's on the agenda tonight. Because this is just a time for us to discuss. So go ahead, Scott, or whoever wants to start the discussion.
I'd appreciate hearing from the public here to see if they have anything first.
This is not an open public comment session. You brought this up, you moved it to the front so we could discuss it.
Can we not ask that people stand up and address us now in this informal session? Or can we?
I suppose if you want to recognize someone from the public to talk about this section, to talk about something that they have a concern with, you can. But again, this is very much out of order.
All right, well, thank you. So I'll just ask if anybody has any comments they'd like to make.
No, Scott, if there is somebody you want to recognize, you can do that. I'm not going to allow you to open this up to general
All right.
public comment.
Chris, do you have any comments? Would you like to make?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
Chris Schuster. So are you gonna work through the economic development section on this agenda item or just discuss the public comment that was received because Alan had noted in his packet for your last meeting that if a discussion of this was gonna take place, it would need to be publicly noticed. And there was no public notice for this, and this discussion definitely needs to take place. But the people who are going to be affected by this and are wanting to engage in this discussion, because economic development informs a lot of other parts of this plan, they should have the opportunity to be here. And there was no public notice that it was gonna be on the agenda. In the Engage Whitefish site, it just talked about the natural resources section. And just this on the agenda. So I'm just curious if you're gonna work through the section now or just discuss public comment.
I think, the goal is to have a board discussion about the comments that we've heard. And again, this has been said, but people are somehow not hearing it. The economic development section is going to come back for further discussion at a later date. And I'm hoping that we have more specific dates when that is going to happen.
We don't have that chapter written yet. We do, we have the consultant study that was done, and from that, we put together some draft goals and objectives just because it was fresh, that we had a study at the beginning. And our plan was that towards the end of the process, re-engage that consultant to update all the numbers and also help inform some of the land use discussion, because those things are related to each other. And then this board would be able to look at the whole chapter, look at all the updated numbers and look at all the goals and objectives, and would focus in one meeting, just focused on that item. But we just haven't, we're working on all the other elements of this first. Because that has so much far reaching stuff. It's tied into the land use and housing and transportation and everything else.
Yeah, and that's been my understanding all along. And for whatever reason, we're stuck in this place of something we decided back last July that we're unable to move forward with. And that is a problem, I think. And that's a problem of I'm not sure what the genesis of that problem is, but I hope that you understand, Chris, and I hope the public understands that the economic development section is not done. We haven't seen the full draft of that section yet. And there are things that we'll have very deep discussions about when that time comes. We're trying to get through the less controversial sections first, and the ones that don't require as much data first, so that we can get to those and have more time to really dig in on those. Yes, Alan.
Just to add about the economic development section, so that section has not even been finished or even gone through department review yet. We would have to look at the report, right? The reason why you got the goals and objectives is because that was part of what we hired the consultant to do. That was part of their scope. When the consultant was done, then we were going to eventually write that section, but before you even see that section, it's gonna go through department review. It's gonna go through all the different agencies and all the different stakeholders. Then it would be released to the public for public comment. Then it would come to you. We haven't even gotten past the goals and objectives that were presented by the consultants.
Go ahead, John.
First of all, we did not decide on the goals and objectives last July. In fact, it was June and there was no vote, and silence is not an action of the board. So here we're asked to give direction to the planning staff. And it seems to me that at some point, we'll struggle with this as long as necessary, but we need to have a board vote on what the direction to the staff is about the goals and objectives. And we did not decide at the last meeting, it was not part of the motion, that this be deferred to later. You can go back and check the recording of it. That wasn't part of the motion. So I think what Scott's motion sets up is a direction to the board regarding economic development.
And Mr. Chairman, I guess my question specifically would be this, because I don't recall taking any votes. All we have had is sort of this informal process of giving direction back to staff. And last time we had the comments that John had made on the economic development goals and objectives section. They were responded to by staff, point by point. There was no discussion of that changes. And I guess my question comes down to this. Does this board have the power to take a vote to direct staff to make changes to the drafts that are being written, recognizing this is not permanent, but to make a change, like say, add moderate growth, not rapid growth? And my thought is that we either do or we don't. And that the reason I handed out this statute, which talks about the role of the planning board, says quite clearly that the planning board shall prepare a growth policy and shall serve in an advisory capacity to city council. And so the way I read the statute, the authority that I think controls here is that this board may take a vote on specific matters that come before it and then give staff to direction to include or to not include certain language. And I mean, I think all of kind of the misunderstanding and confusion kind of boils down to that. So that's the main topic that I wanted to discuss with the board.
Well, I will tell you, as the only person in this room that sat, not in this room, but on this board that was part of the last growth policy, that we did not vote up or down person's comments. People made comments, staff said, yes, we can accommodate that, that makes sense. And if staff said no, because they are the experts on writing this thing, then we would defer to the staff because they are the experts on this. And
I read
whatever reason, on this board, there is a lot of distrust, maybe, I don't know what the word is, that we don't take staff at their word when they say we recommend against inserting this language, and they have paragraphs of why it should not be inserted. if you all want to go ahead and vote up or down on every one of our comments, we can do that. That is highly inefficient and it is going to delay the process. And hanging over this is $400,000 worth of taxpayer money that we lose if we don't get this done in time. It doesn't mean we should make sloppy decisions, but it means that we should really let the staff do their job. And if there is something that we are so passionate about that we feel like we need to vote up or down on it, that's fine. If staff gives us a really good justification of why something should or should not be included, then we probably need to swallow our pride and say, okay, I get it. I understand where they're coming from. It is their job to write the growth policy. I see that the statute says we are in charge of creating a growth policy. And if you all want to disband the staff from doing that and write our own growth policy, I guess we could vote on that too. But what we're getting comments from members that are detailed, that don't have all of the information. Our staff is the part of our city that is writing the growth policy. They have all the information. They are the experts on this. We are not. And we might have an idea that we'd like to see pushed forward. But if staff says that doesn't make sense here, then we should trust them. I mean, at some point, we have to trust the staff to do the jobs that they are assigned to do and that they're paid to do by taxpayer dollars. That's my take on it. You all can have your own takes on it. I am not going to demand or drive the process any more than that. If you all want to go through John's 7 pages of comments and vote up or down on every single one of them, we can. I am going to, as the city council member, direct staff to leave both in there because the city council is going to want to know what got changed and what didn't. And they're going to want to have a say on whether they agree with the planning board's decision on each of those. My other take on this is that by taking votes on every single thing that we want to have included, that staff says we shouldn't have included, it's going to require a lot more work by city council going through and making sure that that we agree with what the planning board wrote and what they voted on. And I don't think that's efficient, and I don't think it necessarily makes sense. So that's my take on this. And I understand there's confusion about when things are going to be final and when there's time to give input, which is why we created this meeting. I mean, we were all feeling that pain that we didn't have enough time in an hour to try to figure out these complex issues. So I think that hopefully by having this meeting that's less formal, that has a little more of a focus with no time deadline, we can work through some of these things a little better and feel better at the end of the day when we actually give direction to staff. So, and we'll have more input to give to staff because we'll have more time to do it. And that's why I asked to have this put back on the agenda today so that we could kind of get to the bottom of this and have this discussion.
And I appreciate that. So if I can respond. I agree that I think it would be a good idea to have any comments from this board next to the comments of staff, which we have on this sheet here. I also agree that, you know, it would be inefficient to go through each one and have a long discussion. So maybe we could just focus on the one that says moderate growth, not rapid growth, because the goals and objectives are more policy oriented and less kind of detail oriented. I think they reflect the sentiments of the community, and this policy does drive all of the implementation that they're working so hard on. And you know, where their expertise is not only needed, but respected, at least by me. So I'm certainly not trying to replace my thoughts with theirs on anything technical, which is their purview. But in looking at the 2 columns here side by side that we got last month, on page 9 of the packet, It says staff recommends adding this language. And then it gives a reason why. And so maybe to make this more time efficient, we could have a discussion about that one subject. And, put it to a vote, to see if, this board supports that change in the language or not. It's very possible that it doesn't. But I think this is a discussion worth having. And we have been attempting to have that discussion for a long time. And the response has been, we're gonna do that later. And under MLUPA, the robust public discussion should be taking place and it's front loaded. Right? I mean, and we did have the visioning session, but if we're not discussing some of these things and voting on some of this language in each one of these monthly meetings, I don't see the purpose even of having them, other than to sit here and let staff tell us what they're writing, and then, they ask for direction, but, if there's not some kind of clear direction in the form of a vote, I don't see how this board is exercising its statutory obligation to prepare a growth policy. So my suggestion would be that we take up a discussion of that one topic of the, I don't know, 10 or 11 that were before the board last time. And maybe I'd ask if John could, since this was his recommendation or suggestion, that John could speak to that. After which I would ask that the board take a vote up or down on whether we want to change that language or not.
So in general, outside of John's comments on this, I think that the majority of public comments, since this has been months and months in the making on economic development section, just the goals and objectives, the majority of public comment, email and in person, that I have heard and read, and I don't have it in front of me right now, but the majority of those reflected. So I think we're using John as sort of like the figurehead of this, but most of those public comments said, whoa, this looks like rapid growth. And I don't think that that was in response or because of something John said. I think the public took affront to that. So that's my concern with this is, if we're holding these meetings and public discussion to talk about goals and objectives, then we have to incorporate what the public says, and that's our job. So on that one thing, I do think vote up or down so that we can move forward. If we're going to continue to see goals and objectives and then say in the future, we'll see the body of this, I think we have to solidify goals and objectives. Otherwise, the public will become disinterested. So we have to say, we agree on this from what the public has told us and from what we've heard, rather than what John has said or what the staff has recommended. It needs to be totality of what we've heard on the goals and objectives. And from everything that I've read and heard, the majority of people who've spoken are in favor of not rapid. And I understand the staff's resistance to not saying moderate, but I also think that we have to listen to the public. So that's
I have a really hard time with the way that public comments are discussed in these types of meetings, because I represent a population that for a variety of reasons can't show up. They're not emailing, they are attending visioning sessions, they are attending, the neighborhood by neighborhood things. And when you point out, oh, the people that show up in public and the people that are emailing, it only represents a portion of the population. And what the staff is doing is taking all of the visioning sessions, all of the feedback that they're hearing, and they're compiling their reasons right next to, in these columns. And so for me, it's like a personal affront every time we have these conversations, because it's like erasing a whole portion of the population. Their comments don't matter.
Well,
Because
where are those portions of the population?
they're showing up through the visioning sessions, okay? Those are the people, I came to many of the visioning sessions, a bunch of young people intentionally showed up because they wanted their voices to be heard. I have been coming to these meetings for a long time and it's extremely frustrating because the people who more proportionally show up to public meetings and email are older, they're wealthier, and not that your voices don't matter, but we cannot erase the people that aren't in the room right now and that aren't able to show up. And that is why I get extremely frustrated with the way in which this is all being discussed. And it does, it feels like a personal attack, and it feels like a personal attack for people that I am in community with, who are in their twenties, who are in their thirties, who are just trying to survive. And it makes them not want to show up to the visioning sessions because they're like, well, then why did I spend that time going to visioning sessions, doing the surveys, if the people who have the most time to engage in public meetings and emailing, who, you know, for a variety of reasons, the people that are going to the visioning sessions who aren't here tonight, like their voices don't matter. And so I mean, this is like why I got involved in this board in the first place. Is because without someone like me here, that is the popular perspective, that if you show up to these meetings and you email, then you have excised influence over what happens. So I'm with Steve here. I think we need to get the ball moving, have this discussion right here. It says this is a more appropriate discussion on land use and housing elements. Listen to them. They're the staff. They're the experts. They're also compiling all of this information. We are dragging this out, and then like, you know, we spent a half an hour when we're supposed to be focusing on these two other sections. And it's really frustrating. So that's my piece.
Thanks.
Okay, so I feel like
I want to ask a quick question. So what? If we add the language moderate growth, not rapid growth, it doesn't say rapid growth in the first place. In the goals and objectives, it doesn't say rapid growth anywhere. But what effect does that have on writing the chapter if moderate growth is the goal?
Well, first, are you talking about economic development growth? Or are you talking about population growth?
Economic growth development, right?
You know, because that,
Section.
economic development is, something that you can encourage, but, it's something that's kind of outside of most people's control. You think about the 2008 recession and what effect that had on the economy of Whitefish and all the jobs that were lost. And you talk about, when COVID hit and how that had an impact, and there's nothing that anybody could do to control that, to say we want moderate growth or not moderate growth. Those things are outside of our control. But I do think that, depending on, the visioning and all those things, all the stuff that we heard at those sessions, that people wanted a diverse economy in Whitefish, they wanted better paying jobs. But we have nothing in it that specifically talks about we're encouraging rapid growth for the economy or moderate growth or slow growth. It's just how to respond to growth and what type of growth that we want.
Right. I mean, that's exactly right. This is about trying to get the right kind of jobs, about trying to fix the jobs housing balance, about trying, and what our mobile asks us to do is look at what industries are proposed and what industries do they think are going to be in the future and how are we allocating for those. But what does rapid and moderate growth mean? Because we don't have a definition. And how does trying to diversify the jobs drive rapid growth? That's not even a definition that we have. It's not a definition that we have.
So at the visioning sessions, I went 2 nights in a row, and there were exercises through people's iPhones and so forth. And Alan put together the numbers and came up with this pretty explanatory, illustrative way of looking at it. And so affordability is the biggest one, but if there are 3 smaller ones called growth, development, and sprawl, which could be put together into growth. And so growth and affordability are the biggest issues. I heard no one asking for more rapid growth. I heard a lot of concern about growth being too rapid. So whatever moderate or rapid may mean, it's pretty clear to me that people wanted less rapid growth.
They also want affordability.
Wait. Oh, yeah, they want affordability, but that's a separate issue. So,
Are you talking about growth in like new housing starts, or are you talking?
So I think it's population and economic,
Well, John,
but people wanted, this is what, there are over 200 people came to those sessions. they're speaking through these documents now that we have, compiling what they voted for. And I don't think we can ignore that.
I don't think we
So-
are ignoring it. I
Well-
think just because we don't have the word moderate growth in this economic development section, doesn't mean that we're somehow, I don't understand how it's getting translated into we
Well,
want rapid growth because we want to diversify the economy, because we want to create jobs that are high paying, that can keep people here.
The
That's
evidence
the
for
part
rapid
that-
growth is right there in the goals and objectives. Seeking to have a full-time staff person for economic development, spending money on.
That's your translation of it, John. That is not,
Well,
that does not say rapid growth. That's the part that I mean, I'm gonna call the question. We can vote up and down.
I don't like being interrupted. I
Because
think,
we've been
I think
beating
I'm
dead
being
horse
interrupted. Okay. I move that John have an opportunity to spend 3 minutes explaining himself.
That's fine. Go ahead, John. I'm not gonna cut you off. Go ahead.
Okay, so the rapid growth part of it flows from the objectives. They're asking for a full-time staff person devoted to economic development. They're staff for recruiting businesses, for moving commercial development into residential areas, and several other ways that use up staff time to take the growth we have and accelerate it a bit. Now, maybe it's good to recruit businesses so we can get the ones we want, but these are the values that we decide what the community wants. Well, we'll do the best we can with that. There's a book called Putting Together a Growth Plan or something. I looked through that, and we're supposed to decide what the community wants. We decide the policy. For better or worse, we decide it. So the choice of moderate growth is a value. It's a big decision on how we want the community to grow. And so we decide that. We're the planning board, and under MLUPA, we prepare the plan. The staff, I believe, should be supplying us facts. They seem to me to be a bit biased toward this rapid growth, but that's my decision. Anyway, I think we should vote on these changes as direction to the staff to redo the draft and change the goals and objectives to be more consistent with what the people at the visioning sessions wanted.
Go ahead.
Just to clarify, every comment about economic development in the visioning sessions, which I included in the staff report, talks about diversifying the economy, more jobs. That's what the public said in the visioning sessions. I included that in the staff report.
Okay, I think it's time to vote up or down on this. And we could have a motion to.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, just one question. Chris did bring up the issue of a properly noticed meeting. I don't want to leave that unaddressed. What's your thoughts on that? Is this an appropriate?
I am not going to put this on this is not going to appear on another agenda item until we get to the economic development session. I think what's the thing that has been left out at this point is direction to staff.
Okay.
There have been multiple opportunities to comment on this.
I'm not trying to delay it. I'm just simply,
I
raising
understand,
the point,
and
so.
I hope Chris understands that too, that this is the part where we didn't really leave with giving direction to staff on anything, because we closed the discussion on it at that point.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Toby.
I've been looking over this memorandum from February 20th regarding the growth policy update, economic development, and it's basically the staff response and recommendation, and they have 3 recommendations. Staff recommends the Community Development Board delay discussion of the economic development goals and objectives until after the entire economic development chapter element is completed and presented to the board for review. Secondly, staff recommends the Community Development Board continue moving forward with review and discussion of the environment, natural resources, and hazards element as scheduled. And the third item is if the Community Development Board wishes to take action by making specific recommendations on the draft economic development vision theme, goals, and objectives, it must be scheduled for a future properly noticed public meeting.
Okay. I
Which
guess that's-
basically to me says, we can't take this vote
Okay,
today.
let's not do it.
That was
Fair
very,
enough.
Okay,
Fair
Well,
enough.
end of story.
we are asked to give direction to the staff every meeting. And so I believe, and Scott also mentioned, we should make a vote on what direction we're giving to the staff. That's what we're doing. So I think we should vote.
I think we should postpone it and have it as part of our, April meeting.
Okay, well, and some kind of additional notice will be given.
Yes, it'll be noticed as an opportunity to, I mean, the public, I don't know if we need to open it back up for public comment. It's been open for public comment several times now. I'm not sure, Dana, do you have any ideas on how to proceed with this? Cause I'm just, I don't know how to move forward with this anymore.
I would likely have, and get some legal opinion from Angie for that one on the public comment. It's probably best to have it noticed that you guys will be providing direction on this, providing public comment. You have collected a lot of public comment. I will say you'll probably get similar public comment. One of the things that I find challenging with the process, and I think this is something the board and I'm going to talk to Alan about it, is how we're dealing with public comments. It seems like we're getting public comment nonstop on sections, and that is a challenge from a staff perspective. And so really it should be public comment comes at the meeting and you get your opportunity to speak. The board then gives direction to staff if there's changes they want to see from that public comment. But to have to keep coming back or getting public comments on a section later on, that doesn't work. If we did that for council meetings where we have a CUP coming in, we're like, oh, we're gonna wait and see how many more public comments we get. We would never get anything done. And I think that's what's happening with this board is you're struggling a bit with just the public comment changing every meeting and it's still the same topic. So I think you really have to stand strong as a board and say, we're taking public comment and very clearly put it out to the public. This is your opportunity for public comment. We then decide to provide direction to staff to make those edits when the whole plan comes back again, as well as you guys vote on it. So just to have it, I think, and this is probably a little bit of Chris's confusion, is when are we actually providing comment? When is direction going? So I think there's a very clear process that we are doing this one. This is your opportunity for public comment. You collect it all then. If we as, we get comments for council after a matter has been passed through the council, we file it, but it doesn't affect any decisions that they make on that project that's already been addressed. So I think that's just one of the challenges that I'm seeing from the person sitting out of this meeting group most of the time.
well, I think part of it too has been because we had such a limited amount of time, there was a lot of confusion about where public comment comes in. This is our attempt to address that.
Yes,
And so we're just kind of, at least for me, I feel like I'm just sort of trying to find my way through.
yes. I'm hoping that it improved having these work sessions as the place to come and comment on these sections
And I appreciate.
without a timeline. Yeah,
I'll
go ahead.
just say, we can set expectations moving forward because allowing repetitive, unending public comment is not moving us forward. So if we want to publicly notice it for our next meeting, provide public comment, but then we have to move forward with some sort of direction to staff and then it will come back. So I think just setting people's expectations of how a path moving forward is really important.
I was just gonna say, I think Dana's got a good handle on it. I think that's a great idea because then the public can comment on the goals and objectives, which are an area of great concern because they inform the later parts of the plan, land use, planning and zoning. Everybody can have a say, then you can go through the full discussion and then the goals and objectives will be sort of solidified. And then Alan and the rest of the staff can go forward writing the rest of the economic development section, engaging stakeholders based on the goals and objectives that are based on the public comment. Yeah. So anyway, good job, David.
Thanks, Chris.
And the goals and objectives of that chapter aren't complete yet, right? There's more stuff that's gonna be tied in with the land use, with the transportation. That was just the draft goals and objectives that the consultants gave us that we was just part of that chapter. And when we complete that whole chapter, then they'll have a narrative about each and every part of that. And that's a great opportunity to talk about that. But, you know, the majority of the discussion of growth and how fast it's gonna be is part of the land use discussion. Because that's really where, you know, we look at growth. When we did our last growth policy, you know, we talked about the potential of, you know, putting a growth boundary around the city. And instead of that, the planning board and the council decided to have an infill policy, and they wanted to see infill happen. Okay, and that's how that addressed, you know, the growth. And I think that, you know, it's gonna be a topic of discussion for the community, and it is an important one to talk about how fast we want to grow and how do we want to grow. But it's not just driven by economic development. I mean, that's a small part of what happens with growth.
All right, and the way I see us moving forward is one of two ways. Again, there is going to be a time when we see the full chapter where we can change things, still have opportunity to change things. If we, and I don't know when that's gonna be, hopefully I was hoping to get more of a specific time for that, but it sounds like there's no specific time for that yet.
Well, yeah, our intention was to wait towards the end of the process so that we can get all the numbers updated, and we'd have the best information to be able to make decisions about that,
Okay,
you know, after the land use section.
all right,
That seems to me to be colossally inefficient. If we wait 8 or 10 more months to the end of the process and then decide to go back to square one to completely change the emphasis of the goals and objectives for economic development, there's going to be a very strong argument at that point. Wait a minute, we've come this far. We can't redo it all. So I think we should have very clear goals and objectives month to month, and we should vote on them. And they're tentative. They can be changed
okay.
upon
I'm gonna
additional
put-
information.
If
everything.
you guys want to, we can finish that chapter before we do the land use. If you guys want to address that ahead of time, then we can always modify it later.
No,
That's an option.
John's
Just
point
like
is
how
well
we had
taken.
originally.
John's point is well taken. I want to hold off on this discussion of when we do this because we have some other things that we have to consider for the April meeting, because we might not have an April meeting. So I want to put that at the end of our discussion tonight, okay? Is that all right? We will discuss what the direction is and when we were going to finalize our discussion of the goals and objectives on economic development at the end of this meeting.
I appreciate your,
Because there are some other considerations that we have to take into account with that.
okay.
Okay?
Could I ask about why no April meeting?
Well, Alan's not gonna be available, so we need to talk about.
Having surgery, I'll be
Oh, okay.
probably having surgery, it was gonna bring at the end of the meeting. I won't know for sure until tomorrow, I already have a surgery date, I'm getting a second opinion tomorrow, but I'll probably be down for 4 to 6 weeks.
Ooh.
I'm having my foot broken and then re-fixed.
Oh, boy, I'm sorry to hear that.
Okay. So
So that's,
let's take up that discussion at the end of the meeting. Can we do that? Can we agree on that?
Thank you.
Okay. Then let's move on to item number 2, discussion on the draft environment section. So Alan.
actually, I don't have a presentation on that part. And the reason why is Alan Peak Walk along West Planner, City of Whitefish. In December, I'm just gonna basically bring you up to date here. In December, I did a presentation on the environment section. This is the environment, natural resources and hazards element of the plan. It's a very detailed element, 40 pages. To make it easier to understand, we divided it into 3 sections. The first section, environment, went out for public comment, got back comment, sent it to you for the first review in December. There was some discussion and we received some comments both from the board and from the public. Staff made those comments or put into a table where we didn't, which was included with the next staff report, which was the February staff report. So we brought the environment section back to you with the most recent red marks. Board discussed that, there was some public comment, and then in that time afterwards, I received additional public comment on the environment section. I included those red marks and what you see today. Now, it's a little confusing, but we had already done the entire presentation on environment. What you're seeing today, the discussion today, the part you have not seen yet is the next section, which is natural resources. But we put the environment section in there, and the reason why is as we're doing this, we want you to see how it's coming together. So you have received the environment section with the third version of red marked comments. Then you see a clean copy of the natural resources section, which has not been discussed yet. Since that's, so we've had a lot of discussions, we made red mark comments. Since that time, I received another version of comments from John on Friday, and that is here to pass out, but I have not had time to respond to those because we got those after the staff packet went out. So we can continue to talk about the environment section again, or I can do the presentation on the natural resources section.
The agenda item is for the draft environment sections. Let's take that one first. And I have some comments of things that I've noticed. Some of it's editorial. I don't know, do you want me to go through those now, or should I compile them for you and send it even on this?
You are the chair, sir. I will leave it 100% up to you.
We're in an open meeting, so let's do it now. The first thing that I have, it's in paragraph 2 of the first page.
Hang on one second. Let me pull myself a copy so I can get all these. Sorry. Okay,
At the end of the second paragraph,
page, I'm sorry.
page 1.
Okay, you put that on the screen. Sure. Let me try to share my screen. I'm trying to share my screen, I'm sorry. If you give me the opportunity to do it. Okay. See if I can do it.
I think we're all just gonna have to kind of do it.
Okay.
Okay. The sentence just incumbent upon Whitefish to recognize and encourage the historic contribution. I just think we can take out and encourage. I know these are some of these are editorials.
Sorry, I'm not in scripture.
The last sentence
Oh,
of paragraph 2 on page 1.
Okay, one more time.
It's incumbent upon Whitefish to recognize and encourage the historic contribution. That just doesn't, and encourage doesn't to me make sense in that space.
You're saying strike the whole thing?
Strike and encourage. It's incumbent upon Whitefish to recognize the historic contribution of resource extraction while managing our natural resources.
Oh, just take out encourage.
Yeah, and encourage, yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Recommend that as we're going through these changes, what would be best is if you just get a head nod from your board members that you're
Okay.
good with that change, because then you guys can check it off.
okay. Everybody agree with that?
good.
Okay.
You're right.
The next one is that there's really no transition between paragraph 2 and paragraph 3. I don't know if a transition sentence would go well in there.
Transition sentence you're talking about here.
Yeah, because it jumps directly from while managing our natural resources, and then it says there's potential for hazards in every community. It just doesn't flow very well, but that's editorial. Then when we get to page 4, I'm a little confused about the bullet pointed list there. And the connection between promoting alternative work schedules and supporting remote work opportunities and air quality. I mean,
Driving.
I get it. It just seems a little prescriptive there. And it seems like the city doesn't have a lot of control over promoting alternative work schedules for people or control over supporting remote work opportunities. I mean, if we're talking about city staff, that makes sense. Like if we're trying to decrease the air pollution from driving from city staff, having them drive into work every day. It just seems a little out of place. It seems a little too prescriptive.
Cut those
I,
two
well,
like that,
if anybody else has any thoughts on that.
and just make it a sentence instead of having a bullet pointed, just make this a sentence. I could do that and then make this a sentence rather than bullet points.
I mean, because we go from encouraging responsible development to reduce vehicular travel and ensuring viable transportation alternatives such as public transportation. Those make sense. Those are objectives that the city can really work on. Promoting alternative work schedules for private businesses and remote work opportunities for private businesses seems kind of, it doesn't seem like a policy objective that we can have any control over. To me, anyway. Anybody have any objections to striking those two things?
No.
And would you rather leave it bullet pointed or can I just make it a sentence to kind of not call it out so much?
I think you could just make that into a sentence.
Okay.
Next section. That might be it for the environment, actually.
It prompts one question for me, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
What do we mean by walkability?
walkability, meaning that's safe to
It's
walk.
used throughout the entire policy.
Yeah.
As a term, and I've never been very clear about what exactly that means.
I don't, I mean, I have an idea of what a definition of it is. Maybe we need to provide a definition of that somewhere. I'm sure
I'd
there is.
bust out to anybody. Dave, do you have any thought?
Sure.
In urban planning, walkability, accessibility, of amenities by foot, it is based on the idea that urban spaces should be more than just transportation corridors for vehicles. It should be accessible like.
So is that like an infrastructure type?
Safely walking from point A to point B. You've got a sidewalk, you've got an ADA ramp, you've got a crosswalk, you've got a shared use path. So that you can separate somebody on foot from somebody.
Okay, so that's it, infrastructure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Providing the infrastructure that allows people to walk rather than what we see a lot of in Flagler County, which is get in your car and drive.
Right.
And interestingly, at a city council meeting, we learned that the average vehicle trip in town is 0.47 miles. Okay, my next one, this is a big one, because, and it's down on page 11. Pretty sure I'm still in the environment section. We're talking about golf courses, and we have a bulleted list of very regulatory ideas that we expect golf courses to do. And I think that what we need is to call, I understand the concern between golf courses and water quality. It seems like we need to call that out and have golf courses work to become more sustainable. Then it seems like in our zoning code is where we list all of these things that they have to do. And because this is not a regulatory document, this is goals and policies. This is a policy document, and adding something that says develop a site assessment environmental plan in order to develop and implement an overall environmental policy and long range plan. That's more of a policy, but maintaining ongoing records to measure and document progress toward environmental improvement. These are regulatory. These are
That's
things
the list of things they could be doing, or the actual goal under F, on page 13 is what the specific goal is, which is what would basically talk about the zoning, which is encourage golf courses to join the Audubon Cooperative Sanctuary Certification Program, develop a site assessment, environmental plan.
I have comments on that part too.
But that's what that's tied, it's basically the background data for that goal.
I understand.
Are you suggesting strike the entire section?
Well, for one, it feels like we're calling out golf courses as a very specific thing here compared to the broader general goals of water quality in town. And it just feels like there's a singling out of golf courses here. And I just don't, it seems out of place. And that's kind of what I don't think that we should not call them out, but in this we have a whole paragraph about what we'd like to see from golf courses. And then we have a bulleted list of things that sound very regulatory to me. And I don't think that's what the purpose of this document is, and it doesn't act that way.
I'd like to read something from the Montana Growth Policy Resource Book. It's about goals and objectives. And it says, too often growth policies and other planning documents provide large amounts of data and analysis, but contain little clear or concrete guidance about how to improve a city. Because of this, growth policies and other plans can often result in few visible improvements. This can be due to the fact that the growth policy was either not realistic or its guidance language was so vague that the community leaders and residents were unsure what was supposed to be done to implement the plan. So the goals are what we want and the objectives are the steps to get there. Maybe there's too much detail on golf courses, but if we don't put in some level of detail on what steps to take, I would never know. Who would know? So I think we have to be a little bit specific.
Okay, that's fair. If we just look at this section though, we're talking about, this whole section about water quality is things that are going on regarding water quality. And it's, total maximum daily load, other significant, so we're in other significant influences on Whitefish water quality. Whitefish River, septic leachate, aquatic invasive species, city beach interceptor trench, all those things that we've done. And then we call out golf courses, which we don't really have. I don't think we've had, Mike, and maybe you can speak on this. Have we done any water quality testing related specifically to golf courses?
Nothing correct.
Yeah. And now, it just seems like we're singling them out in this and they might not be so happy about that. And again, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of things in those bullet points that are regulatory, that I think need to go into a zoning document. I think we should definitely develop a site assessment. We can say things like golf courses should develop a site assessment environmental plan. They should maintain records. They should have some sort of plan for what they're going to do and how they're going to test for water quality. But the minutia here is way more than any other section. I just seems really out of place. And Toby first and then Rachel.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the last sentence under the golf courses thing of what they should do and that is the city of Whitefish should evaluate future lease renewal language with the Whitefish golf course. It didn't have the word "that" isn't in there, but it's on city property. And therefore setting these shoulds, I think to a certain extent, some are regulatory, some are just suggested, but that's something to keep in mind is that that golf course is on city property. And as I recollect, they are getting a bargain.
Well,
Are you suggesting adding new language to that effect?
Well, that's what the last sentence says.
I'm,
Evaluate future lease renewal language. And the future lease renewal language could include some of these regulatory things as suggestions or requirements.
And the city can regulate its own property. It can be very specific if it wants to. So it's a little different than regulating somebody else's property.
oh, I see. I'm sorry, it's above.
one of the golf courses is on city property, the other one's not. Okay, yes, Rachel.
Well, I was just curious, those bullet points that are listed, are those actually like some of the things that are discussed by the Audubon Cooperative Sanctuary Certification Program? So maybe, and I mean, I totally get why the golf course is on there, totally, but I agree it was wonky that they were all listed. But maybe it could just say, you know, I mean, you could just allude to F, you know what I mean? Like all those bullets maybe don't need to be listed, but it's like for a comprehensive list of, you know, suggested action items, see this program. I don't know.
And we do mention the Audubon Cooperative Sanctuary Society. So
Right, and that's what I'm
easy
saying.
enough to say practices are laid out or whatever.
And that's another one of my comments is that we only call out this one specific program. There are several green golf course programs that they could aspire to get certifications from, and I don't know why we're calling out one specific program. But again, the goal should be that they make sure that they work towards some sort of certification of that, of green golf course, whatever that means, that has a reduced environmental impact.
They're good stewards of the land.
Yes, exactly. And then in our policy, in our zoning code, that's where we would lay out a lot of these very specific things that they need to be doing.
That would only apply to a new one, not an existing golf course. So.
Okay, all right.
Well,
I'm not gonna die on this hill. I just think it just doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like it fits here.
but it could be incorporated into the future lease renewal language. But they're required to.
Could be, yes, well, it should be, yeah.
Audubon or the green golf course rules and suggestions.
So do we keep it or do we stop?
We can mess with it and come back.
I'm just trying to get some direction. I'm just trying to understand
Sure.
what, I mean, I want to be very specific here to about what we want then. I'm happy to delete it. I'll keep it. I just want some direction.
It needs to stay in some form. I'm just not sure that's the right form.
I would say for now, keep it, and then if we decide that it's cited and can be included in a site, like a lot of things that you've cited, and they have active links, or somewhere in an appendix in the back saying these are the regulations.
We could put in a sidebar.
I could put footnotes and just say, here is an example of what they've done.
So we could, we're throughout this plan, we're gonna have graphics and photos and stuff, and we could just have a little box and just say some of the practices that, Audubon or other green things do this, and just list that as a sidebar, but it wouldn't actually be in the text of the document.
Okay.
I think that way it would be in there, but not as
It's a good
prescriptive.
idea.
And as long as we make sure that language stays about the lease renewal will require them to have some sort of some plan in place.
All right, so I'll take these two, if you guys can see the board. And we will somehow put these, because the thing is, you're only seeing the text, eventually there'll be sidebars and all that stuff.
Yeah.
We can put that in a sidebar.
Okay.
Or a footnote or something like that. Does that work?
Yeah, and I would make sure that whoever's in charge of the golf course board sees this now too. I would make sure that they're aware. Okay.
Yeah, and I think at some point, Craig, you said they are aware,
They're absolutely aware of it.
they're aware of this text.
And they're actually doing a lot of this already. They're not, to my knowledge, a member of the Audubon Society, but
Yeah.
I think we'd all be surprised by the level of effort and science that goes into the management of that golf course. So it might be helpful just to have a 10-minute presentation from Mike Holmes or Neil. Just on what they do, to make sure they comply with water quality ordinances.
Okay, just to be clear, I move that the entire list be retained and that there's direction to the staff to incorporate in our document that the next lease include all these.
Second.
A second.
So, say that again.
What you just did. Pretty sure it's what you just did.
He's making a motion that
That be
be
included
included as a sidebar with the next lease.
With that, the next, any future lease should incorporate that.
Yeah.
That would be a recommendation.
So I guess we should vote on it.
Okay, those in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? Okay,
Okay.
passes. So we're gonna keep it,
Pull out.
pull it out.
Folding or footnote or something.
Yes.
It'll be in there, it just won't be in the main body, it'll be a footnote or.
Well, it could be an objective, but just one bar. Kind of like you have it now. You have, the last item says this should be or shall be included in the golf course lease.
Oh.
And then you can just refer back to the
Objective.
list that you gave in the background information part.
Steve said, this is only one of the certification programs that are out there, and this is a basic one. There are more stringent programs out there that maybe the city would want to adopt instead. So maybe like jumping to conclusions and then wanting to adopt this one might be a little presumptive.
Okay, anything we do is
Yeah.
tentative. It could be
Yeah.
changed in July or again in September.
Adoption of the lease is ultimately up to the council.
It's up to council, yeah.
Policy, so they're gonna follow what this says, but the language, I mean, it's 2040 is when that lease, the end of 2040,
Yeah.
December. It's
Oh.
close to the end, we'll be redoing the growth policy. So.
I'm not expecting to do it at that time. so.
2045.
don't think you'll be around?
Well, but the way I'm falling apart right now, probably not.
Well, I have a
Can we impose anything on the golf course before 2040? That's a contract. We can't change anything, right?
Contract with golf course, there's no-
I don't want to get boiled down into the minutia of the golf course. right
Well,
now.
it's
We have
pretty
other things
important.
That we're working on. We have other things that we are working on right now.
I guess for
That's
me,
kind of-
this, can I ask, saying this is calling out the golf course, is there any other business that's leasing land that we should be also calling out in the same
I mean,
way?
like,
This was for golf courses.
specifically, but there are other things
Yeah, I
like
know,
sports
but I'm
fields that contribute to, you know,
Yeah.
nitrogen.
Yeah, so
nutrient
maybe
loading.
if we
So-
include some other things, it's not so much about not shining such a light on a golf course, it's about being inclusive of other leased property that also needs some attention in the environment section. I can't think of anything,
I
but
mean, maybe
they're all
it's-
things that
maybe
you're
it's
willing
like
to.
Soccer field, it's a baseball
I
field.
mean, maybe it's, instead of saying golf courses, maybe it should be something like recreation,
Green spaces.
green space or recreation fields or something like that.
Mhm.
And then include like Smithfield and all that.
Turf-related recreation.
I think golf courses needs to stay as golf courses because they are a very specific kind of
Mhm.
use. And then we could maybe add a section about other turf related areas.
Soccer
Yeah.
fields.
Yeah, soccer fields, baseball.
leased city properties.
Well, I think it should apply to every property.
Right.
It's not a city property. I mean, I don't know if anybody else has a soccer field, a private one, but
The school district.
do we? Okay, school district
Maybe.
does. Do we have standards for that kind of stuff for our city properties? Right, you know,
Well, I mean, we have the water quality ordinance, but that pertains mostly to buffers around the lake and river. The rest of that is primarily controlled to the city.
And I don't know,
In terms of
Parks and Rec has specific standards for some of their things they manage, I don't know, but.
They have certain, I know they have certain parks where they use pesticides and certain ones where they don't.
Mhm.
okay,
And so they have that, their watering, they have their own schedules with how they water, whether it's well versus city water, it depends on the location. But I think the biggest, the pesticides and use of weed control substances, which is the biggest issue, but, again, we have parks where we're going to do that, but we have licensed, they have to be licensed to do those things, each and every one applies it, so. I wouldn't say there's any specific plan related to actual environmental assessment.
Okay. I don't think that we should require city leased properties to have a site assessment and environmental plan necessarily. Might prohibit them from being able to
Play baseball.
do the work that they need to do. I don't know. Golf courses generate a lot of money. Other areas, other fields don't necessarily operate on those same kind of budgets. And I don't. Mike, do you have any idea of what the water quality impact could be of over fertilization on the soccer fields or the baseball field or?
I think like wanna put in some designers, some groundwater monitoring
Yeah,
programs to know the flow patterns and if that's breaking out to surface water or not. So it would involve a pretty in-depth study.
okay. So what do we want to say in growth? Do we want to say anything in the growth policy about these things? Is there policy, a general enough policy that we know that it's on our map, it's on our, it's on our minds that but it's not necessarily something that is gonna be acted on in the immediate term.
Do you want to answer that? Well, we do have an objective that talks about fertilizers, public education, the usage of fertilizers.
Okay,
Fertilizers and herbicides, I think it says. Pesticides, pesticides, fertilizers and herbicides,
Yeah.
objectives.
that's one of, yeah. Chris, yeah.
Thank you. I was just gonna say, I think you have it covered pretty
Yeah,
well.
covered.
in the goal on page 13,
So
number 1, objective A. I think you did a pretty good job.
am I adding a section about sports fields or not? Okay. I mean, it doesn't take to read, if I,
Covered.
I think we do.
Yeah, just, you want me to read it?
I can see it, yeah,
Number,
But,
objective A under goal 1,
yeah.
seems to cover
Yeah.
public and private
Soil erosion, chemical contamination.
contamination.
Yeah, okay, we already have to cover.
if I can, sir.
Yes. go-
At the end of the day, we've got goals and objectives that are saying, this is what we are, this is what we want to be, this is how we want to get there. The narrative is kind of backing up why we have those goals. So we don't have to list every single possible water quality issue. We're just trying to, the objective would apply to any fertilizers or nutrients, right? We have to be cognizant of that. But there's any number, working on my motorcycle is also an issue, and I'm not gonna add motorcycle maintenance, right? So it's just, we're justifying the objectives.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Although I don't have a motorcycle, and my mom won't let me ride one.
Yet.
Okay,
So, Mike Kupal is here because I invited him. And, this relates to the comments that, I put together after consulting with Mike, and Toby was there as well. So I realize it may be a little premature to discuss them in detail because a lot of people just saw them. I filed them, about 9 days ago, but Al went on vacation, which he certainly is entitled to do. So what to do about that? We have Mike here. I could have him explain some of the important things that got added. What's the sense of the board on how you want to do this? Or it could be next month.
no, we're doing this tonight. I hope everybody understands that this is the time to comment on this section. Then we're moving on. Is there, what part do you, it would help if you have a specific place that we can look in the document that we can determine whether what you want to change or what you want to have added or what it is.
Well, Al, I think has a pile of these, the March 5th document.
There's a stack of them right there, or there was a stack of them.
Yes, we have
There.
them.
So this is what it looks like, a lot of underscored material. So what I did was I made a couple of the opening statements
Anybody wants?
into general goals. And then I broke things into sediments, nutrients, and storm drainage, golf course, various specific things. And all the material that is not underscored is new. So, I guess I'd like to ask Mike to explain the ones he considers important. That would be helpful and perhaps give some of the science behind it.
Sure, I'm happy to answer any questions. This guy was prepared by John and brought to me for, I think in general, these are all good points. I think there's a few areas, comments I would have to this list. Hear that.
Sure, yeah.
On page 2, item E, that's about water quality information center. And where I agree with that in concept. I wonder if that's too much being undertaken already with the information at the Whitefish Lake Institute website. Certainly don't hurt, but add undue staff time on some things that partners are accomplishing Item G talks about tracking the 303D compliance. That's a EPA list of impaired waters that are used by the state of Montana. And in terms of impacts leading to listings and probable sources, I think this is probably an area that the city does not have to be involved, but this is accomplished by the Department of Environmental Quality. Under nutrients number 4, item C, or actually item B, I would highly advocate that the city council or the city Whitefish consider an ordinance related to the time of sale or transfer of land to initiate a septic system inspection. Item C, I would strike septic fields and replace with septic systems, inclusive of systems. I like, and John and I talked about aging septic infrastructure. I've got a little heartache over listing the actual age. We know that in general, most septic systems that are 30 years of age or older are becoming inefficient or outright failing. But that doesn't mean that there are some systems 30 years of age or older that are functioning properly. Right, so this should be based more on the actual inspection. Yeah, that really item as well, where it puts the numbers on maybe the system. I think if we did push towards a time of sale or transfer, that would eventually get to all these aging systems. Maybe not as soon as we would like. It's a mechanism to do that.
Mark, was there a statute or a piece of legislation being proposed this time to that effect that you're aware of?
For septic system.
Yeah, time of transfer.
There's been,
It's attempted in the past, in a way.
yeah, past 2 sessions, there's been septic bills that have involved.
So would there be language in there that would be in one of those draft pieces that would be specific to time of sale or transfer that we could adopt into this? You think?
There are other jurisdictions that have done that, out east. Right, so there's some templates out there that we could use.
Yeah, and I think that would be a really important addition here, personally.
And then in terms of, to be honest, words, 5 years, whether or not city Whitefish wants to get into something like this or rely on partners again, like to sort out. We're celebrating 20 years this year and we have a lot of seasoned data, so we're able to make conclusions on long-term trends, not only on the lake, but on input tributaries and our website, which we've been more robust.
Mike, refresh my memory. How often don't you report to us once a year?
Yeah,
Or-
I was talking to Dana about this. So I just submitted to Dana the aquatic invasive species management. I usually don't do that during work sessions, talk about that and other current issues. Yeah.
This June.
June, okay.
Mr. Chairman, on this one, I think during the last session, I think I asked Stephen Craig about what kind of benchmarks might exist that we could measure any kind of a impact on water quality that growth and development, in the broadest sense, would have on the condition of the lake. It looks like these would be directed at preparing some of those, because right as it stands right now, from what I heard last time, there really aren't any. And I think that if that kind of a direction was included in this growth policy, that would be very important. to enable us to have some objective criteria against which we can measure these impacts.
Well, the Institute on its front page has State of the Lake, and they just put this up a couple weeks ago. And it does track some very specific items with graphs and so forth. So again, the city may rely on the Institute to supply this information.
We already do.
It's
Mike-
what, yeah,
Mike receives some portion of your budget. It's not very much, but we would give you money every year.
okay. So for this reporting, it says obtain or prepare. So you could just obtain it from the Whitefish Lake Institute.
Have to those needs to standards that we recently developed, like flood. So if you go on our web page, look at total nitrogen, total phosphorus, and some other things. And we set benchmarks for these. Based on, especially our science advisory committee. And so we now have basically the threshold for which we don't want the values to go over, which we consider the figures. And the caveat to that is we sample in the middle of the lake. Right, so there's a real distinct difference between what happens in the middle of the lake and what happens along the shoreline. Along shoreline is much different. The impacts of making these decisions are manifested there immediately as compared to the middle of the lake. But there are a lot of nuances and types of sampling things regarding the middle of the lake. Don't want to get into these. If we go through this a little further under item number 8, this other items. It talks about public matters. Under 8, I would make the term voting more inclusive to watercraft access. And then item B, looks like this is language that's already really. I'm just wondering why certain groups are called out and not others. So I would suggest that the city work with and support nonprofit conservation partners. Or doesn't that mean necessarily nonprofit, but nonprofit or agency partner?
Yeah.
For item B, aquatic invasive species, talks about programs to neutralize the threat of aquatic invasive species. I don't think others neutralize the threat. I would just write that and it puts it with the word reduce. Then under item I, talks about wildfire. And goes on to talk about our surface municipal water supply. I would relabel wildfire water supply because I'm concerned about a couple of things where it comes to our water supply, and Craig and I have talked about this. But you know, you get a ground fire going to put second, third creek, and that's going to jeopardize our structures. And then God forbid we have something like zebra mussels in Whitefish Lake, at which point we don't want their little microscopic water bowl stage being sucked up to the water plant and choking like the pipes.
So what was the change you suggested there? I didn't get it.
Well, you got it, right?
Change water,
Just
wildfire water supply.
water supply.
Eliminate the
Oh,
word
okay.
wildfire,
Water supply.
eliminate the word wildfire.
Wildfire impacts on wildfire.
All right.
But I think John did a great job finding this list. In general, I'm very supportive.
So Mike, just a question for you. Right now, we don't have anything in this draft about the sediments, nutrients, storm drainage, or reporting. Is that, you think that's an oversight at this point that we need to include those things in this section on the water quality reporting? But those 4 things, yeah.
You know, again, I think we have a pretty strong nonprofit partner treating these things. And whether or not you want to rely on Whitefish Lake Institute to report out on that versus the city taking the lead on it.
Right.
Like you want to include language in the event that somehow Whitefish Lake Institute was out of business. Right, that somehow has covered that. This information is getting back to the city, but there are multiple partners related to collecting water quality, right? So,
Yeah.
there's BQ, which is really in charge of water quality. Right. We certainly add value, but we also partner with the Flatted Lake Biological Station. And their scientists to have consistency and comparability with Flatted Lake.
Okay. But, I mean, there's nothing in here about sediment in the current draft that we have of this water section, nothing about sediments. Is that, you thinking,
It's number 3.
it's in your draft, yes, but in our draft, there's nothing about sediments. And you're, when you say that, you're saying that we need that information in there. You think?
I'll say there is information.
All of that is mentioned in the draft. John just broke it up into sections. All of those sections are, and like the idea, like there's, I mean, I can respond whenever you want me to all of this.
Okay, go ahead.
So there's a couple things I think that there were some really good points. The one about the enacting regulation, the still transfer land and septic inspection, that was a great point. I agree. But, okay, so I guess the first thing is, if you look at, let me scroll down. Sorry, Rich.
Catch you later.
Much of all of what you are seeing from other significant influences on water quality, talk about sediment, talk about nutrients, it's giving you specific information. When you get to the general policy, the first general objective, it shall be the policy of the city of Whitefish that no land maintenance or land disturbance, private or public shall cause soil erosion, chemical contamination, sedimentation, nutrient load.
I'm sorry, Alan,
discharge.
you're talking fast. What page are you on?
I'm on page 13. Objective, it shall be the policy of the city of Whitefish that no land maintenance or land disturbance, private or public, shall cause soil erosion, chemical contamination, sedimentation, nutrient loading, or stormwater discharge that adversely impacts other properties, roads, wetlands, or any other water body. Zero sedimentation and zero nutrient loading shall be the target. That right there captures what is under sediments, number 3, in what John is proposing. It captures what is already proposed under number 4 in nutrients. It captures what is in number, there was one more. So I'm saying it's already in there. This is basically a rewrite of the same thing. The things I really have concerns about were about the periodic testing and all that, way out of our purview, which is kind of like Craig is here.
What kind of testing?
Well, like the whole water quality website and doing the periodic testing and the specifics about all that, it's not stuff that we do. We don't even have the jurisdiction to do that.
Right,
That's
you
what
can rely
Craig's
on
here.
the Whitefish Lake Institute for
Right,
that.
so we already talked about that. In this section, we talked about WLI has been doing this. So what I'm saying is all of this is discussed, it's just in a different version than what you presented, but it's all in here. It's just a lot has been consolidated. Instead of having to break it up into individual ones, it's saying nutrient loading, no sedimentation, it's all in one thing rather than having to break it up. So this is basically just a kind of a rewrite in a different way of what's already in there. But some of the stuff, if we include it, will need to go back through public review and through agency review, because there's some pretty big things that are being added here, like the water quality website and all that stuff. That's a kind of big deal to add.
That's not added. Don't worry.
Yeah,
You can rely on the Institute for that.
but I'm just saying, this is what's in your draft. What you wrote in your draft says, periodic report. Each 5 years, the city of Whitefish shall obtain or prepare reports, and there's a whole lot of this.
The obtain means obtained from Whitefish Lake Institute, and we can make that clear, but that's not what I'm suggesting. And Mike has amended it to make it even clearer.
So then I'm confused because I thought this was what was your version of how the goals and objectives should look.
Yes. Yeah, after consulting with Mike and we, went over it and
But it
added a lot of
does say-
ideas.
But it does say a report on water quality, and if this is your rewrite of the goals and objectives, then that is what you're saying should be in there.
You can obtain that from the Whitefish Lake Institute, like this state of the lake thing is really quite good.
It says obtain or prepare, so we can get it from somewhere. I think the question is, how do we want to structure the goals and objectives? Because we have one overarching goal. that has then objectives that touch on all the different things that John has proposed here. Nutrients, sedimentation, storm drainage, golf courses. This has several goals that then has objectives. I assume that the A, B, and C are objectives within those sections. And it's just, it really is just formatted in a different way. That's what Alan is saying. That the stuff that's in here that we can do is already in the draft that we have. It's just not in this format.
Except for like the water quality website. and all
Well, there are
that.
some things, yeah, that we,
That's all new.
right, those are things that we would need to, that we should go through and say, this is something we can't do. Or we can just say that we're gonna go with your version, with the version that we have. Because I do think that it is, I think it seems to me that the stuff that we have all the information in the current draft. It's not broken down as like this. This does add several things that I think we need, that Alan, I think you should go back and address and give us that side by side. This is why we can't do this, or this is why we suggest not adding this. But as a group, I think we need to decide whether we want the format broken out into several goals or with objectives under each goal, or whether we want to leave it as it is.
Well, I think most of the things I added are not in the goals and objectives. My view of the goals and objectives was you have really good goals, which are 0 nutrients, 0 sediments, but then there weren't enough steps of how to get there. So I think there are quite a few things that Mike talked about also, which are in addition to what's in the water quality section that Alan did, as to goals and objectives. Now, some of these things he's referring to are in fact back in the background information, but I don't think they're in the goals and objectives. So that's why I broke them out.
I mean, obviously, this wasn't drafted line by line to replace whatever was line by line in
No.
Allen's, right?
No, it's a complete rewrite of goals and objectives.
So, but would it be, Alan, would you be amenable to sitting down with John, the others, to kind of see how they integrate, as a first step?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
I mean,
We're
sure,
gonna meet anyway.
we didn't, obviously, because I was going out of time, what I would have done is prepared a review table and described why or why not. I mean,
Okay.
that's really the best, I'm very,
I think that's what we're missing. I'm gonna try to we need to move forward. It's already.
And I think we
7:30.
can work this out.
so I can
So,
prepare something and say why or why not. I just have not had the time.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right.
I think for that, I don't think we should vote up or down on these right now. We should get that analysis, but the problem is that is our direction at this point, and we will see that when when this comes back, when we get the whole shot.
I will prepare a table that has all of these and describes yay or nay or why or why not.
And then it comes
Does
back,
everybody agree with that?
and then it
Come
comes
back to
back
this.
as like a larger draft, correct?
Yes.
And then I will bring this draft back to you once you have that table, because there's a whole lot of formatting stuff that I don't know what we're doing if we go with this, right?
Yeah.
So I will bring back, as far as this goes, we'll keep talking about what we have. I'll prepare a table comparing what he's saying about what we already have, yay or nay or why not. And then you can look at that table and decide if there's anything else you want to change in this draft based on that table, reviewing what he is proposing.
That fair.
That's the
everybody?
easiest way to do
Do
it.
you want to meet and?
I mean, sure.
Yeah, okay.
Happy to.
Yes. Whitney.
So once the table is prepared and Alan has gone through this and it comes back to us, I think that's where we have this sort of disconnect of, do we then talk about, if he says this is why not? Do we talk about why not, and do we vote up or down then, or?
Well, this is the problem with receiving things like this from this board. Instead of commenting on the draft itself, when we get a full rewrite of it, it's not something Alan can accommodate in time that he has, especially when it was delivered 8 days ago. it's not something Alan has the time to address in a very specific way so that we can provide that direction. And this is the problem. You're right. This is the
Yeah,
problem.
this table and what we do with it. You know, like this merging of things, I think because we're all on different schedules and then when we come together, I don't think there's anything in here that we should necessarily lose. I think that these things should be incorporated. And I don't know exactly how Alan will do that, but my only issue is when this table comes to us. Like, I think we should vote right now, do we want to incorporate these things or not? And then skip the portion of the table that says why things aren't incorporated.
All right, then we can go through this thing page by page and letter by letter and determine whether we want to include them or not, or we can trust the staff to adopt the parts that make sense. And then when it comes time to approve this entire chapter, when it comes back to us, then John can have the discussion of, you really need to put this in there, and then we can vote up or down. This is the efficiency part that we need to get better at.
Yeah, I think it would come down to 2 or 3 items that maybe Al and I disagree on.
Okay,
Might not even be that many.
okay.
So we get the table and that's the why, and then we wait to see what's in the final draft and then we discuss,
That's how I think we should address it, yes.
okay.
And I would encourage us not to do these kind of things in such a short time before the meetings, because it's not fair to Alan and it confuses the entire process.
Well, we just got this today, but it was prepared earlier, so I think that's, you know, because that's the issue that I'm seeing too, is that I don't know when John prepared it, but it's here today in paper form. So it's kind of like, that's like, if we need to have a time by which goals and objectives, some response if it's written, if we need to have a time by which we have those in so that we have time to have a table prepared.
Well, we have a public comment period that we, every time we release a chapter, Alan gives a date.
Even after the staff report went out. So if I've already sent the staff report out, I'm not gonna now turn around and add stuff to a packet you already got.
No, you can't do that.
So
I think
I agree, John did send it out like 8 days in advance or whatever on Friday, but the staff report went out on Thursday.
But it was already out.
It was already out, so I'm not gonna go and add stuff that you guys haven't seen now. That's not fair.
Yeah.
Right?
I
And
think-
it is difficult to get whole rewrites because it's easy to red mark things, but to rewrite whole sections, it makes a big deal because now we're talking about, I might have to send it back through public review and through agency review again. One little thing changes a lot of things.
Because if it comes back at the end in a significantly different form, and they've commented on the initial form, especially at the agency level, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And we as a board we have to understand that. It's much more our place to go through the draft as it is and prepare side-by-side comments of things we would like to change, like I've done tonight, than to address an entire section and try to prepare a rewrite of it that is one person's version of how it should look. And that's,
So I think the reason that Al and I can work this out is that we both look to Mike. And that he's the expert and,
we're talking about the process.
The staff and,
We're not just talking about
and I,
we're not just talking about this, we're not just talking about the water quality part, we're talking about the process.
Right.
At this point.
And how in the future to make sure that we have steps that we all follow and clean.
Yes.
Yeah, I get that.
So Alan, can you give us like when you need from the board comments like this in order to have enough time to be able to do like a side-by-side table? Like what day before the staff report goes out do you need public comment?
So is
so that we can
everybody-
be
Sorry.
Efficient, no, that's fine.
Is everybody engaged to the website?
Yes.
Did everybody get a newsletter alert?
Mhm.
Yeah.
The news, okay, so, this one is a little trickier because we'd already talked about this. And I already thought we were moving on to natural resources, but a perfect example is when I sent out the newsletter on natural resources, that would be public comment. And I said, please submit comments by X, and that gives me enough time, it gives me like a week before the staff report goes to you. It gives me like a week to look at everything and incorporate it or put together a table saying why I didn't. It's a little different here because this was first talked about in December, right? So we're already making stuff, several months later. But when I send out a section, like I just did with natural resources, I would say, please submit comments by X, and that's public comment of anybody. The only difference should be now when it comes to the planning board, the community development board, now you're looking at that draft and there might be additional stuff that you want to change. But if you're giving me a whole list of rewrites or whatever they are, it's really fair. There's no, I get multiples of versions of things from the same people, not all, I get multiple versions of things from the same people. And there's just no way I can fix that. So I'll tell you, public comments are due on this date. If public comments aren't submitted on that date, then it makes it difficult when we're at board discussing those things.
Okay, we need to move on. Are there any other comments in, so we're on to the wildlife section, wildlife and habitat section now. Other than some editorial changes, which I will send to you, Alan, and you can do with what you want, what you please. I only have one comment, somewhat editorial, but I think it just needs something that needs clarification. And I'm on page 16 in the last sentence of the last paragraph there. Where it says city police are currently developing a wildlife management plan. I think we need to clarify that. That we can, this is my suggestion for the rewrite, is that the police department is currently developing a wildlife management plan in accordance with Fish, Wildlife and Park.
And maybe even it needs to be more specific. It's not wildlife, it's deer.
A deer management plan.
It's deer. We're not.
That is, it is actually what it is. It's,
Yeah.
so, yeah, so a deer management.
Deer management plan.
I'm sorry.
And the direction was to bring examples to council. Yeah, so really.
In accordance with, I'm sorry.
Fish, wildlife and parks.
What is, that seems kind of
Not
vague to me.
accordance, But it's in coordination.
Coordination, there we go. That's the word.
Yeah.
They have some different regular rules for writing these things.
Coordination, okay?
They don't want to write it for you,
No,
Tell you what the
they don't
rules
want
are.
to write it.
but they have to.
Anybody else have comments on the wildlife section? Okay.
I just have in, your footnote number 9,
Okay, chronic wasting disease,
yes.
okay?
So either put a period after similar animals or
Oh, yeah, sorry.
don't, that's very small.
Okay.
It looks good.
Wow, how did you catch that?
I love footnotes.
Somebody.
Oxford comma.
Somebody.
Tom is killing me. I'm not gonna say it though. Yeah,
Okay,
That's a matter of style.
no.
Any
they
comments on
capitalized
that? Let's go to climate change. Anybody? Any other comments in climate change?
Steve,
Yes,
if I may, please,
yes.
on this section, I want to be very clear that we wrote this and this went to the Climate Action Committee and they spent a lot of time working on this. So let's know the committee work, this has been written in great part by the Climate Action.
I have a couple of questions about goals that may need to be added. On page 19.
Okay.
Talking about, valley-wide commuter, number D is talking about valley-wide commuter and visitor public transportation.
Okay.
Including the creation of a transit plan. Do we need to have something? Because big part of our climate action is our bike ped master plan and our transportation plan. Should we call out that will continue to implement the transportation master plan, and bike pedestrian master plan in this section?
It's
As goals, as objectives, continue to implement both of those. That makes sense, Craig?
Mhm.
One more time.
Continue to implement the transportation master plan and the bike pedestrian master plan as a separate objective.
transportation plan, bike ped plan, okay,
because those have a lot of that,
got it.
stuff in them.
What about working with, the county? Is that something that we should at least try and have as a goal? Recognizing that they don't really consider this a high priority, but we kind of do.
I mean, it says support local and valley-wide commuter, which should obviously
Yeah,
imply
there's-
the county
I think-
would have to be involved.
Some of it is embedded, I think.
Okay.
Directly putting things in there to directly work with the county.
I guess that's not what I was saying,
It's
you
like a
know,
county
but at least as a
community.
goal, right? I mean, I do think
Well, it's
that,
a separate goal.
I don't know. I raise the issue because I've been going around with Randy Burdell about this for decades.
Yeah.
I don't, I just tossed it out there, maybe not.
Okay.
I feel like the goal to work with the county could go with, in a lot of sections too.
I would defer certainly to your
Yeah.
judgment on that.
Yeah.
I just have one more, issue, it's with objective F on page 20.
Okay.
I don't think the last sentence methods could include revising zoning to allow more types of attached housing by right, reducing or eliminating setbacks and smaller lot sizing. Those are things that we will do when we get to that phase, rather than calling them out here, I don't think is appropriate. Methods such as,
I added that specifically because Nathan asked for it at the public hearing, so I added that sentence.
just doesn't, I don't think it belongs at that point,
Fair
so.
enough.
But let's get consensus from the board whether we should take out that sentence.
I would strike F.
How many of you agree to strike it? Okay,
Okay.
and Mallory, no,
No,
Okay.
obviously.
so the consensus for the majority was to strike it.
I did want to say thank you for the E, 5, encourage new buildings with EV and solar ready. And the other mentions of solar that you've included in here, I believe this isn't the only one in response to a comment I raised, which I think is important. So thank you.
I do listen to your comments and. do-
I really appreciated it. I didn't get a chance to say thank you before, so thank you.
I just wonder if it should be part of our, maybe our new building requirements, is that it's over a certain size, then it has to
I think
provide.
there's a state law that was passed that you can't require solar.
Can you require electric vehicle charging stations?
Yeah, what we did with town pump, you'll never do that again.
So is we then changing this to say encourage city buildings? Or,
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Video.
so are we saying?
Encourage does not require. Encourage does not.
City owned buildings shall be?
Well, let's leave it. Let's move on.
Okay.
Okay, and that brings us to natural resources, unless
Public
anybody,
comment first.
oh, public comment, sorry, public comment on these sections. Richard?
Alan's had, I gave him lots, but one of the things that occurs to me in this discussion, and I don't know where it goes other than perhaps in the climate action plan and dealing with climate. And as I run around town and look into dumpsters, particularly at building sites, the amount of cardboard and wood waste that just gets thrown into the huge dumpsters. If there was a way to somehow encourage contractors, developers to say, you don't have, every time you empty a cardboard box, it doesn't have to go in that dumpster. It could be collapsed and recycled. And just thinking that we're missing an opportunity somewhere, and I don't know if that's appropriate in here or not, but it's something that every time I just see them overloaded with stuff that could be used, made into wood chips, burns, biofuels.
Question is where to recycle it.
Well, I think,
We can say encourage. Yes, Alan.
There's, in the public facility section, which you haven't seen yet, there's an entire section on solid waste that will talk about that.
Okay.
Recycle, I mean, it's like, and in fact, she met with the climate action committee and they talked about solid waste, I think, for a whole meeting. And there are recycling policies ad nauseam.
Okay.
It's part of the problem, just doing little sections at a time.
As the part of that discussion been the solid waste board, like at the dump?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
And there is a narrative about the county landfill in there and some of the fun history with that. You just haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
Any other public comment on this section? Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, I think John has it in here, like there's much it's document, but it's going to be clear if Whitefish Lake Institute's position on this goal of adding public access to Whitefish Lake. Whereas I can see that would be a public comment perhaps.
Yeah.
And I value that. One thing that I'm very concerned about is if there is a boat ramp associated with that public access.
Gotcha.
And we strongly recommend that not occur. We have a really robust invasive species management plan in place now, functioning really well. If we throw another access point on the lake, that's going to undermine. So I would encourage the city not to put that in.
Not even for non-motorized.
That's,
So strike the whole thing.
No, he said, no, non-motorized is fine.
So with John's language, as written.
So.
Yeah, I put
what we have
swimming
right now-
only.
Yeah, right. He put for swimming, but not boating. You're saying with his, basically retain his language. I shouldn't say.
So
I think the current draft addresses that.
it does address that.
Does it say swimming?
So it says, in order to avoid concentrations of impacts on the resource, encourage city, county, and state of Montana to provide additional access points on Whitefish Lake for public recreation while limiting boat launch areas to existing sites that can be effectively monitored for aquatic invasive species.
That's a
That's what the
recent
goals is.
change.
Yeah, that's a change.
Based on Richard, John, and their discussions on it.
You've addressed it already.
Yeah, it's been changed.
What page was that, Dave?
That would be on page 13 right at the top.
The new version, today's version.
Next one's the word watercraft.
Oh. Okay, I guess I didn't see that before.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, anything that has a bilge.
Got it, okay. Thank you.
Quickly, it's,
Top page 13, instead of boat launch.
hold on a second, let me get there. Um,
My notes didn't get anywhere.
boat launch, just say
Watercraft launch.
craft. Okay, got it. Okay.
I just mentioned that, there are a number of locations around the lake that people can launch boats that are not at the city beach. And that's,
Private.
coming from the
Private.
Lake Shore Committee.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of them. And when you start getting out of city limits, up into the county district, it's
Ideally, they've been stopped somewhere at a public boat,
ideally.
ideally. But yes, those are all private though. This is calling out, providing more public access points.
We do Carlos contacts the like private marinas. And they actually will work with her on ensuring that boats are inspected.
Good.
And we did add language to the lakeshore regulations to require inspections for private boat launches.
Well, and if pray that the legislation extending the jurisdiction of the lakeshore regulatory scheme to the entire lakeshore, I think that would be a huge step forward. Does anybody have any?
Burnsville, that failed.
It failed, yeah, it's already gone.
It did?
Up in-
And we're gonna table the Senate.
Right.
Okay, all right, natural resources. Okay, Alan,
Can
yes.
Fade for like a 5-minute break?
Yes, let's take a 5-minute break.
Okay.
Been here for almost 2 hours already. And.
When did
see how
that
many
go
more
down?
hours we have to go.
Dana, you know when that went down? I'm expiring. How about you?
Been a couple weeks at least, maybe a month.
Americans, right? They're going on vacation. That's about hiking. That was there and all the different structures, so yes, these are. Well, the meeting was like. Going. It's good.
Sound very optimistic. Lots of crazy going around right now.
It's an investigation.
If I can say it.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great.
Trying to take a look at the natural resources thing on the Vision Whitefish.
I don't know.
Clicked on it.
You go like that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Get
The
to.
doctors are just wandering around. and say,
Oh, is that- Yeah, I've got it
Exactly.
somewhere.
That's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm just very glad. There. I'm thinking. It's good to see you. Yeah.
So you doing, Serge?
Thanks for that time.
It's a week past my time. How you feeling? You look great.
It's just the goals.
Yes, you do.
Hopefully.
Well, it was an act of. I requested your.
I know, but I still have the
There you go.
authority. I mean, I can position.
Perfect.
That's been.
Opportunities to get to points for that sort of thing are long.
Ideally.
Oh, no.
Oh, Tara.
Sure.
Oh, yeah. And this thing's.
You look good.
All next time.
But I can, yeah. Did you guys? And if you can.
When we have.
So, yeah. Yeah.
When we have full chapters.
Yeah.
It's another section.
I think.
That's some Diet Coke.
I really would like to get somewhere.
Absolutely.
I'll
drum it.
I just know you kind of.
Yeah. Follow.
I actually pushed some things out when I say.
Yeah, well, we're gonna.
Either incorporate your comments or set in that table that's in there why I did.
When we're gonna have that.
If you give them to me in the time that I have, I will respond.
Unless it does not make.
We could.
Again, look at the response table, and if I didn't include, I tend to why, I didn't make that, that's fine, but otherwise, so what's in there?
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
It's quiet.
Okay,
That'd be
good.
great. I have your number.
Yeah.
I have your number. Okay, good. All right, I'll tell them. Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you.
So we have to have staff members.
Yeah.
That's annoying. I can't. I don't even. I just. You know, waste time on chanting in this meeting.
Just make it excited.
I'm with the night.
You're what?
Okay.
Oh, I know what I was going to tell you.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Take care.
Next section might be quick if nobody has any comments and I didn't. Just nothing.
Check your spam folder. I actually checked to make sure your name is on the list. I'm that scared.
But no, still, I get them. When I last put on,
So you didn't give me my natural resources.
no, I had to go in, I never got a notification. I've been in.
Friday, I'm going to, tour the Capitol.
I always double check your name and make sure it's not on the list.
Last time I looked at.
St. Louis.
I don't know. Otherwise, I'll try to be for it.
And then the week after that, I'm going to Las Vegas for a convention of the National Alliance of Broadcasting, which is a big thing.
We're done with the natural resources section.
This one for the water.
Oh. All right, let's get started. Please, it's 8:05.
This was the
That's
result.
where all of us are ready to go home.
It was total.
Richard has a general comment. Richard has a general comment he'd like to make so that he can go home.
That was my level.
Okay, Scott, can we come back to order, please? Thank you.
If it pleases the chair,
Yes, go ahead.
and the committee, since Alan has already incorporated most of my comments that I submitted on the, natural resources section, I didn't want to stick around for all of that, that's gonna go on over the next few minutes. But I want to point out at least a personal frustration, but it's also a frustration that I have had from others in the public, but I'm speaking only for myself. And that is, it's not always clear how and when it's timely for the public to comment. I understand these are work sessions, but on the other hand, when the agenda says it's going to be public comment, but the comments have not yet been submitted, I mean, that's the first notification really for many people in the public, unless they do what I do, which is kind of weird, I know. I go on the website and see what's coming up next. So, the public frustration over when and how best to comment, whether it's in work sessions or when decisions are being made. And I just wanted to share that with this board. The frustration is out there.
I think based on our earlier discussion, I think we're gonna try to clear that up tonight and put something on the website about when, try to redefine the process and make sure that people have it clearly when they should submit comments.
And I think it needs to be in more than just the website somehow.
Gotta be in the
And
plan.
Alan and I were just talking about the alerts. They don't seem to be coming out the way they used to. So, but he's gonna check on that.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right.
Thanks to everybody on this board.
Thank you, Richard.
Good luck.
Okay.
Good night, Richard.
Yeah, thank you for keeping our.
Night, Richard.
Let's go home and have dinner.
Does anybody have comments, on the natural resources section?
You want me to run you through a PowerPoint? At least you get, we don't have to.
Let's skip the PowerPoint if there are sources of,
No problem.
okay.
No.
Unless, that's my choice. I'm not gonna speak for everybody. Does everybody want the PowerPoint or can we?
No, I think most of us all of us have read the thing, so we don't need Al's summary.
And the PowerPoint.
Wonderful as-
It's gonna just summarize, all it does is summarize it.
Do you have a question, John? or
No,
comment?
that was my comment.
Okay, all right. Nobody has any comments on this section?
I think it looks good.
Okay,
And you guys are starting to see maps now. I've been creating maps, but you just didn't see it with the environmental section. Although John got a really good catch there. I didn't see.
Or, I have one question, I guess, Ron.
sure.
So on the grazing land, are you using soil maps from, how are you, the
The prime ag land map,
yeah, I mean, like, so it's challenging.
what the long and short version of that.
Sure. Short version.
Let me, so just realized I don't have that. You're referring to the agricultural and prime farmland map.
That's correct.
Okay. So there's a couple of different ways. I sorry, I just realized I just have the pure text on the screen. I don't have the PDF, so it's not on the screen. Right, actually, I can get it. So that if anybody's watching, they can see what I'm talking about. Give me 1 second and I'll have it. Okay. You're talking about this map, how I come up with this.
Yeah.
Okay. Few different things. The first thing that I did is I went on to the county assessor's website and looked at how property was assessed. Then I went through Google Maps and the GIS, and I literally looked at the aerials to see if it looked like it was being used as farmland.
Okay.
Then I used information from the Montana Department of Resources and the BLM. So it's probably not perfect, but you won't find anything more accurate.
Well, so the soil maps that they've got,
Soil maps came from the BLM and those came from the, all right, when you say soils,
Well-
some of the prime soils,
all right,
yeah, that,
like for grazing, right? So, and that's how they assess it for purposes of, how many animal unit, whatever,
Yes.
that can support based on these historic soil maps, which are astonishingly accurate in my experience.
was that facetious or was that?
No, from many years on the tax bill board, that's,
It's a combination of looking at what the assessor says that piece of property is, and I did this manually, so I literally looked at it.
really,
It was insane, and I'm insane. I literally looked at what the assessor says that property is being used for. For all these properties, it seemed like they were agricultural properties. I looked at the BLM and I looked at the US Department of Agriculture's soil maps.
right,
And then I also looked at the Montana Department of Natural Resources irrigation land, and with all those things, I put together this map. I can't guarantee you
No,
that
that's-
you'll go somewhere and not find a piece of agricultural property that's not shown on this map, or vice versa, but it's pretty darn close. 95%.
So then my second question is, we have the small ag exemption in this state, right? That if, I think they're toying with it down there now, but if you can show $1,500 worth of gross profit off of your operation with receipts, which would include garlic going to the farmer's market, that sort of thing, then you can qualify your land in downtown Whitefish, my lot and a half. If I can produce $1,500 worth of produce and show it to the Department of Revenue and they want it down to the penny, then I can get my ag exemption for my land, not land under the house, but my land. So my question is, with the whole kind of micro farming or whatever they call it, movement, and people, trying to become more sufficient, self-sufficient, and us wanting to encourage small, farming operations, which that statute specifically encourages and has for many years. Is that anywhere reflected on here in terms of?
I don't specifically talk about the small lot exemption law, but there is language in there about encouraging small produce farms, farmers markets, and there's different strategies about how to encourage what you're talking about.
Okay.
There is language in there about that.
All right.
Yeah, I can pull it up, but yeah, we've talked, I mean,
Well, I
we
read
call them hobby farms, or whatever, call them.
Well, see, that's kind of a misnomer, right? I mean, that's one of the things that,
There is, so there's a lot of discussion about smaller farms being more important now, because this narrative talks about like one of the threats is that the larger, bigger pieces of land are becoming subdivided or having development pressures, and then it's put that the possibility exists that more small locally owned farms are gonna be more important in the future. I basically talk about that in here. And then I have some strategies about how conservation easements and right to work types of things, or right to farm types of things mentioned in there.
so, you know, I read it. I don't specifically recall what you're talking about here, but, maybe that's something I would like to come in and sit down and chat with you about.
Sure.
Because I do think it's good, it's important, especially in this community, to let people know that, you know, you can farm your land, right? Even if it's a small lot. I mean, there's ways to do it. You know, you don't want people to be encouraged to try and get that ag exemption so that their valuable land on Whitefish Lake
Apple orchard.
value, yeah, undervalued. But this is all orchard, you know, on the west side or the east side of the lake, right? I mean, my place, it's all old orchards. So, I mean, it's kind of a boutique, concern of mine, but I really kind of like the solar, you know, I mean, I think there's a strong movement to encourage that, so maybe it's
It's
something.
another goal to support, you know, small micro farming, agriculture.
The absolute best thing that anybody could do is red mark it directly into the text, right? Because it's,
I will.
that's the absolute best thing you can do for me, because like when I get all these different, look at this and look at that, and I'm not discounting what you're saying, but the best thing you gotta tell all the agencies that look at this is add a goal. Put some red marks in there that I can see, because it takes all the guesswork out of me and makes it so much easier to just get to the point you're wanting to give me. Red mark it, I'll give you a copy. We're good to go.
Well, I will do that. I was more concerned with generally how you
I'm
develop.
not gonna get this perfect. I'm doing the
No,
best I can. But again, that's, if I can't say that over and over again, red market, or Steve goes through very directly and says, change this. That's the best direction anybody can give me. If you don't like the whole section, rewrite it, because I've had people do that too. But write it in the document, right? Don't hand me papers.
Can you send it as a Word document?
I can, if you want,
PDFs.
if you want, I can put a Word document in your packet. And then you can make red marks directly into it if you want to do that.
That would be.
That would be great.
I
If
do
you
have,
haven't been doing that, but I can do that.
I do have one suggestion for the goal under timber operations
Let me get down there.
or timber resources, so that's
Page.
26.
Okay,
The goal, I'd like you to consider rewording this to encourage
Why do I only have 11?
sustainable forest management and fuels reduction, again, timber operations that support fuels reduction.
so encourage sustainable
I'm looking at it.
forest management.
It's only got 11 pages.
And what was the next thing, Steve?
And timber operations that support fuels reduction.
Take out future
Yes, or you can leave future in
and
there.
future timber operations that,
Support fuels reduction. I think that's more in line with what the community seeing encourage future timber operations kind of might take people aback a little bit.
does that work?
I can't see that. far.
Encourage sustainable forest management and future timber operations that support fuels reduction.
Yes.
Okay.
Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Okay.
I have a comment on page 24, under objective 1 or goal 1.
Just a second, let me get that. 24?
Page 24,
I probably don't have the same. Which goal is it?
it's the encourage preservation of prime farmland and productive agricultural land.
Okay, I think that, hang on, let me get that. I think I probably got a different page number than you do. Okay,
Goal 1, objective C.
okay,
So it says support annexation of prime agricultural land for development purposes when it can be demonstrated it is needed for proper expansion or the land is not productive.
okay.
I just wonder if, and this could be more appropriate in the land use section, but if land is going to be annexed in for urban expansion, if there could potentially be a zoning that there's these things called agri-hoods that specifically creates like development on ag land that also honors like the historical nature of the ag land. So it like still centers around farming. So development is done in a way that keeps the majority of the land open.
Could be something in D, read the next,
Encourage the preservation of prime agricultural land through such mechanisms as conservation, clustering developments. Yeah, and I just wonder if that is, and I can bring it up under the land use, but like coming up with specific zoning around like that cluster development on ag land. Do you know what I'm saying? Have you ever heard of ag?
Yeah, I've
neighborhoods
heard of
before?
that. I mean, I don't know how we can zone for that particularly, but.
Okay.
Well, and that was actually sort of what I was aiming at as well. So
So I don't know if it's like a certain percentage of the lot can be developed, but it can be developed into like multifamily, single family home, but it has to preserve like
wouldn't that be
percentage.
wouldn't that be cluster, I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I,
Clustering development to obtain the most agriculturally productive areas?
yeah, and I wonder if like in that section though, that there's like a designated.
Considering zoning,
Yeah, that like,
I mean, I could add, encourage the preservation of blah, 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 I'm sorry to cut you off.
no, that's fine. I'm just trying to work it out in my
Well, I'm
mind.
thinking as I'm talking,
Yeah.
thinking out loud, encourage the preservation of prime agricultural land through such mechanisms as conservation easement, zoning, clustering development.
I'm thinking like a planning and development that had, residential around that perimeters, but
Right.
maintains the agri
Yeah.
farmland, and then that would be the community benefit is
Yeah.
maintaining that. farm.
Specific,
So it'd be that something like.
Through
zoning,
PUD potentially,
like
yeah.
zoning, which allows clustering development,
And protecting farmland.
And protecting.
Let's put zoning that supports
which
supports continuing farming operations or something like that.
supports
I mean,
farm
the densest zones don't preclude
operations.
farming necessarily, although you can't have like farm animals on certain zones.
Zoning which supports farm operations by clustering development to retain the most agriculturally productive areas.
Sure.
Okay.
I'll bring it up again in the land use.
Okay. I have it all figured out.
Yeah,
It'll all be done.
start scheming.
All right, any other comments on the environment section?
Natural resources.
Natural resources section, excuse me.
I hear you.
Okay, any comments, public comment? Anybody online? We didn't check online before, actually.
Yeah, Nathan, if you're on there and you want to comment on any of this, it's your opportunity.
Get his voice in.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
He's not, he'd have to unmute himself.
I guess I'll make one public comment.
Okay,
I think it's important, there's so much of the public has a misconception about density. But it's really important that we understand water quality, our natural environment, wildlife. The way we disrupt and endanger those things is by building out with sprawl. And the only way to protect our true, what hasn't been already citified, is by building infill, by having more density. And unfortunately, that is hard and it is change. But the more we build out, the more we're impacting true wildlife and not the deer that are overpopulated throughout our cities. So all the great stuff that everybody wants to do, it's hard to do without giving in to some more density. I just think a lot of times the average citizen thinks, it's just a misconception. So,
Can I ask you a question?
yes, sir.
So how do you feel about height restriction?
Me personally, or me from a standpoint of best for pollution, et cetera, more height is better.
Let's, I don't want to get into that right now. We've been here for 2.5 hours already, and that is absolutely, that is coming up. That will be coming up in the land use section, so.
Thank you for your.
Okay. All right, does Nathan want to make a comment? Or are we trying to get his voice in?
I don't think.
Oh, sorry, my battery's dying. The plug I was plugged into wasn't plugged in. So
Oh, okay. All right, so that brings us to the last thing we need to talk about is, so have you gotten the direction you've needed tonight, Alan?
On everything except for the economic development.
Right, that's what we need to figure out.
Um,
Before we get there, so I do want to talk about the process. And I think that hopefully tonight's process will be the process that we have going forward with a little better communication with the public about when and how they comment. But I do want us to understand that these meetings will be, come prepared to these meetings with your comments, whether you have written comments that you've submitted already, or if you go through the document and highlight things you want to talk about or changes you want to have made. Come to the meeting prepared to do those things. And then we'll take public comment here in this section, or in these meetings before we give final direction to staff overall. And it'll be a little more informal, where like, kind of like what we did tonight, where wasn't just a direct public comment period. It was, we got people to talk, whenever we felt like we needed to hear from them. And that's how we want these meetings to run. But then once we're done and that direction is given, we're not going to see that again. We're not going to see that chapter again until it's in its final form, pretty much. So we're not going to go back and rehash things that we've already gone over. So those comments, if you make additional comments at that point, they will be filed and you can hold them until we get the full chapter. With the exception of the economic development chapter. So that's the other thing we need to talk about is we decided that we want to have a chance to vote up or down on some of these ideas, at least one of them for sure. And we need to figure out when we are going to do that. And I'd like to ask Dana what she thinks, because she's in charge of our staff time, and it means a lot to have 3 staff members, 5 staff members here for 2.5 hours on a Wednesday night.
So for the economic development chapter, how to bring that back? If the board wants to go through each of the items that have been listed there, I think what we would do is, it couldn't be no earlier than the May meeting because, we're gonna be off in April. We could notice it, provide, public comment for that one. And then the board should do what they did with natural resources and environment and go through and make the changes as we go through that document. You could do that. I think the staff recommendation obviously has always been like, let's just revisit this when we bring the whole chapter back. I understand the concerns of when we're bringing that whole chapter back. So, it is up to the board. This is your guys' process. And so staff will, do what you direct us to do in this situation. But, it would be very important to notice it, take public comment, and then we'll be done with the goals and objectives at least, and no more communication about that till we bring a full chapter back is kind of what our intent would be.
and the chapter has the narrative that goes into the detail of all the goals and objectives and what the background of them is and the justification for those things. And that's why that's a part of it's very important, as why those goals and objectives are there. The narrative, has to support those things and why they're in there. So without that, just seeing the goals and objectives without the narrative makes it very difficult for you guys to be able to evaluate those things without all the information. So that's why we would prefer to have that whole chapter before you guys to be able to look at the goals and objectives, and then you could evaluate that, and you know, you agree or disagree with the analysis that we provide and what the consultants have provided, but at least you'll have all the information of why those things are there, what it's promoting, and it's not just a goal floating out there with no background.
My question is, and this goes, if we make these changes, how substantially does that change your work in putting together the rest of that chapter? That's my question, because it doesn't, I'm stuck trying to figure out like how it's gonna change your work if we decide one way or another on adding moderate growth versus rapid growth or those kind of things.
Well, I mean, we weren't intending to have growth scenarios in the economic development chapter. That's gonna be something for the land use.
We don't, yeah, first thing is tomorrow, I can probably send you an email if you want. I will know for sure tomorrow whether I can be here in April. I'm having a second opinion tomorrow. All things held equal, I'm not gonna be here in April. As far as that goes, the problem is we don't know what that means, okay? The only time we've talked about like moderate or slow growth is when we worked on the demographics. You arrived at a, what you think the population projection was between 1% and basically 2%, right? But when we say the economic development is, well, it's somehow moderate or quick growth, I don't know what that means, because the economic development section is talking about diversifying jobs, providing goods and services. It's really, I don't know what that means. That's the part that I'm struggling with. Is if we can add that, but I don't know what that means. So maybe you'll have to figure out what that means.
You don't know how that changes the work.
It doesn't change. Now, as far as the staff position, if you may or may not have noticed, we took that out. Because that was a lot of people's comments about having a new staff position. We struck that out.
We've already added that position. That's why it was struck out. We have a, you know, a sustainability planner that does economic development, housing, and transportation.
Right.
That's what Tammy does.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, I totally lost my train of thought. So it doesn't, whether we're a slow growth community or a fast growth community, those economic development policies, I don't know how it changes them. We're looking for a diversity of jobs. We're looking for people to be able to work where they live. We're looking to, the community and the visioning, and I provided that, said, we want to be able to have goods and services in the city of Whitefish. Those things, doesn't matter if we're growing fast or we're growing slow, aren't gonna change. And if we have vacant properties like the hospital property, something's gonna get built there, regardless of what we want our growth scenario to be. So that's what I'm saying, it doesn't, the scenarios that we're talking about is when we're looking at land use and we're designating where the areas are that things should occur. That's the growth. So that's my problem, is that the two don't relate, it's apples and oranges.
You're seeing a disconnect between.
It's apples and oranges.
Growth and economic development or not.
I know that there's some disagreement with that, but just with the experience that I have, this was a lot of experience, it's apples and oranges, it doesn't relate. If we were even trying to promote the right types of businesses here, businesses are still gonna locate here. It's just which businesses do we want to locate here?
Yeah, and how much say do we have over that, right? I mean, with, you know, Senate Bill 382, I mean, there's a limit on what we can say can come or go. They're also pushing on us residential growth that we have no control over.
I get it. To John's point, though, I think his point is that there's a way that this section can be written that promotes some sort of faster economic development versus, and this is our opportunity to say, hey, we want to slow this down in this document if we can. I just don't know how, I guess it's less in the word moderate growth versus slow growth and more in the details of the other comments that are here. And I think those might be more important in terms of looking at what are the policies of the city going to be moving forward with regards to economic development that could potentially encourage faster growth. I don't see the city policy having much effect one way or the other myself. But I think there are some points in here that maybe if they're not part of the chapter, that we need to decide that that's what we want to add or delete.
Yeah,
Or change.
Just as an example, you know, there was something that came out of our breakout sessions in the different neighborhoods, most particularly on the north end of town, and I think it was on the west end of town, where people said, you know, wouldn't it be great if we had some kind of a little neighborhood market that we could walk to or ride our bike, that we didn't have to drive all the way to town? Which is why there's a thing in there that talks a little bit about neighborhood, like limited neighborhood commercial that would just serve the neighborhoods, right? And that's very controversial because people think any kind of commercial going in there is gonna blow up into something that's gonna affect them with traffic and everything else. And so there's a delicate balance there, and that doesn't necessarily mean we're promoting growth. It's just something that people said over and over at these breakout meetings that they wanted to see. And so there's a goal that we, you know, put in there, and I think that the consultant also talked about that a little bit in their report. But that's, you know, and it's a controversial idea, right? Because
Yeah, well, and also in order to maintain flexibility for the next 40 years, 20 years, excuse me, there are some things that there are some policies that we need to state, whether we ever act on them or not, I think is the other, you know, that's where the rubber meets the road.
some things like that, tied to our plan of action.
Rather than rehashing my argument.
Yeah, let's decide, so I think we have decided already that we are going to have another meeting, is that correct?
Yeah,
Where we vote up or down on these? Okay,
And May, sounds like,
it sounds like maybe we add some May, are we doing the hazard section in May?
Yep.
Yes, if I'm not having surgery in April, do we want to have that meeting in April?
yes.
I should know tomorrow afternoon.
And
More than likely.
we'll see you all again tomorrow night at the planning board meeting, so.
That's true.
We can let you all know.
Okay,
More than likely I'm gonna be out,
That's
but
true.
in case something changes.
okay, can we do that? Can we decide this tomorrow night?
Yeah.
I totally
Yeah.
forgot about that meeting.
Yep.
We'll do that at the.
Sounds great.
You look at what we're gonna.
All we need is a motion to adjourn.
Liberated.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, we are adjourned.